Tonight I was going to talk about, well, I'm still going to talk about it, spies, espionage, and clandestine radio. And I thought I'd take a historical perspective on what it is. There's tons of information here to cover. We should be here, I could probably cover it in about 6 hours. But instead what we'll do is I'm going to go through a lot of books and just say something very briefly about it and say this is it, blah, blah, blah. Up here is listed all the titles of all the books here. If there's something here, including the films, if there's anything you're interested in, it's listed up here. Also, I know you're just going to go wild, and I listed all the spy movies for next month on Turner Classic Movies. So you can go ape and put your sunglasses on and your raincoat and basically go wild and pretend you're a spy. I think, when people talk about spies, when you say spies, the first thing that people think about is James Bond. They don't really think about real spies, and a lot of people don't even know what a spy is. But really a spy is an intelligence officer. And if you're a good intelligence officer, other people do your spying. And you just collect the information from them, and then you pass it on to your headquarters. But if I can just show you just a couple, just spies in general. These are just headlines from news articles here within the last month. Dutch withdraw spies from Iran because of impending U.S. attack. That was from the U.K. New Zealand jails Israeli spies. These people claim they're not spies, but they are spies, but nobody ever admits to being a spy because that's part of it. You want to go your entire career as a spy and nobody believing that you're actually a spy. Those are the most successful spies. Like I said, James Bond would never be a real spy because you don't go in and say, I'm James Bond 007, because then you're made by all the intelligence agencies of the world, so that doesn't work. U.S. diplomat recalled after spying allegations in Bolivia. That's American spies being caught. Russians accuse UK diplomat of spying. That's MI6 spies in Russia. All countries spy on everybody. America spies. We spy on all our allies. We spy on all of our enemies. All our allies spy on the United States. There are spies right now here in Manhattan, Kansas. They're called college students, but they're actually intelligence officers usually from countries that are not friendly to the United States. There also is an FBI office here in Manhattan that keeps track of this stuff, so you guys don't have to lose any sleep at night because they're keeping track of this kind of stuff. Cuba's expanding its overseas spy network. Top intelligence expert says, this is one section I want to talk about tonight, about the amount of Cuban spies that are in the United States, which is tons of fun. U.S. man gives intelligence to Israel. Again, an American giving information to an ally. Still illegal for fun and excitement. Israel admits to spying on the U.S., and which they do. All intelligence agencies spy on each other because it's fun. Top Georgian intelligence officer arrested in Russia. One of the first things you want to do if you're going to invade a country is you want to arrest the intelligence officers, because they're the ones that usually know what's going on. So they're the first ones to go in jail. And then documents detailing early spy network released. Some of you might know who Julia Childs is. She was a famous chef. She was also an OSS agent. She was a spy during World War II. She was dropped into France. And we'll be talking a little bit about OSS, which is the forerunner to the exciting CIA.
Isn't France a native country?
No, France wasn't. She's an American. Here's another interesting fact. I'll just try to hit a few interesting facts because I'm going to try to keep moving because I know you'll get bored if we sit here too long. Now, does anybody recognize who this is? Probably one of the most famous spies in the world.
Mata Hari.
This is if you can read, it says it's Mata Hari.
But you said she was famous.
Right, but I bet you one thing that you don't know about Mata Hari is the famous spy. She wasn't a spy. She was shot as a spy, but 5 years later when they did the investigation, she wasn't a spy. So that's what people don't realize. The most famous spy in the world wasn't a spy. She was stupid, but she wasn't a spy. And one of the things I wanted to kind of touch on tonight was three different areas. It was basically wanted to talk about clandestine radios, which was what I put in there, pirate radios, and number stations. And all three of those things are different. Let's just break it down real quick of what they are. A number station is a station run, the CIA does it, Mossad, Israel does it. They send out numbers and letters to people, to agents that are in countries where they can get messages. And we'll go in a little more detail how that works. But basically, if you pick one up, it'll say, well, first it'll give you an ID so you know it's your message. So it'll say 416, 416. If you're 416, you know the next message that's coming is yours. And they'll say A6, B12, and they'll give you the code. And you have what's called a one-time pad. One-time pad can't be broken because it's used by you and your intelligence agency that you work for. And when you use it today, you both tear off the pad and destroy it, and it's done. Tomorrow, when you get your next message, you're using a totally different way of communication, so you can't break it. I'm also going to teach you tonight how to do this, so that you guys can send secret messages among yourselves to people. And we won't get into dead drops and all that stuff, but if you're interested, I can teach you how to do that too. But that's another story. And then pirate stations. Pirate stations are stations that are illegally transmitting on either commercial FM stations, or they're transmitting on ham radio or shortwave frequencies. And there's two ways of doing that. A lot of them use what's called, on the AM band, they use what's called a grenade. Now, it's called a grenade because it looks like a big beer can, and it's a transmitter. And it's designed that you can throw an antenna up into a tree, and then you can start transmitting your information, then you can pull it down and run off in a certain amount of time, because the FCC has got tracking stations in the United States, and they try to home in on where that frequency is coming from. And I've got a book here also of a lady who did it on FM, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And a clandestine radio station, you would think that, okay, that just means it's hidden, but it's not. Another thing you're probably not aware of, but what our government does and other government intelligence agencies do, is we set up clandestine stations and we transmit pretending we're somebody else. For example, during World War II, the British transmitted a station into Germany called Radio Deutschland, and Germans would listen to it thinking it was a radio station being transmitted in Germany, but it wasn't. It's coming from the BBC, but they had British people that speak in German. They would give out false information, or they would give out real information, and people in Germany, German soldiers actually believed that what they were hearing was an actual station inside Germany. CIA does it. Like I said, all the intelligence, we all do it. But nobody will admit to it. Nobody will admit to a clandestine radio station, but they exist, and it's kind of exciting. The six things I kind of want to cover tonight, real quick, is German spies in America during World War I and World War II, the American spies in Europe during World War II. I'm sorry, German spies in America during World War I and World War II, and American spies in Europe during World War II, codes and secret messages, pirate radio station history, clandestine radio stations used by foreign governments, the Cuban spy network, and the wonderful world of espionage, which is kind of fun. So basically, I thought I saw somebody's hand go up. There are two really good books that I would recommend if you just can't control yourself and you want to have information about German spies that were in America during World War I. I highly recommend The German Secret Service in America, 1914 to 1918. This was published in 1918. It's an original book. I don't know what it's worth, but it's all moth-eaten. And the most successful sabotage activity by the Germans during World War II, what happened in New Jersey when they blew up an ammunition factory. And of course, we don't have the same security then as we do today. They took a rowboat and basically went up next to one of these barges and set fire to it, and it blew up because it's full of ammunition. So it was pretty simple, a pretty simple procedure to do. Also, the Germans were way ahead of us. The Germans actually built a radio station off Long Island, and this is what it looked like. This is the 500-foot antenna. And they had a number station. The first number station was actually in Germany, and they were sending messages to the United States. So that's where the number stations actually originated from, was from World War I. And then, of course, this is a picture of the actual station. And so the Germans built it, and they were doing it, and America was totally clueless that this was going on, which I think we're all pretty excited about. I know I am. And so we first started off, like I said, with the Germans here during World War II spying on us. And another thing that you do if you're an intelligence officer, if you're lucky, there's two kinds of spies. First of all, you're an intelligence officer, and you can be a diplomat, or you have what's called diplomatic cover. And so I could be stationed at an embassy. So if you catch me spying in your country, then I get to go home. Because, see, I'm a diplomat. I'm not a spy. But we also have spies that do not have diplomatic immunity. They're called illegals. And they work for the organization, but they don't have diplomatic. If they get caught, they go to jail. Just like the Israeli spies that they got caught, and they said, well, we're not spies. Because you never admit that you're a spy. Even though you eventually will, because they're going to torture you. Even though torture doesn't exist. But sooner or later, you'll tell them you're a spy. But they train you to hold the information. You try to hold out for 72 hours, especially if you're arrested during an actual operation, because you want to make sure that the operation can still be successful, because you know the operation is going on. And if you spill the beans in the first hour, then they can go after whoever else is connected with you, or try to run down your contacts. I'll just touch on this real briefly because I think it's a really good book. This is Soviet espionage in the United States. It's called The Haunted Wood, and it covers Soviet espionage in the United States between 1930 and 1940. And this covers through World War II. Now, some of you are probably familiar with the Soviets trying to steal our atomic bomb secrets. Or maybe you're not. Well, anyway, they were. And so we had lots of Soviet spies in the United States. We've always had spies in the United States. As I said, we've got some here in Manhattan today. So spies are always with us. Even though a lot of people, like I said, have this James Bond sort of view of spies. And of course, this is a ham radio club. So I have a couple pictures. This is a typical suitcase radio that was used by the French and the American and the British underground during World War II. And they called it a suitcase radio because the radio was actually built inside a suitcase. And it probably weighed about 40 pounds. It was HF, and it had an operational range of anywhere from 500 to 800 miles. And they make these things stupid-proof by the actual frequency is like one of these here. You take it and you literally have to change the frequency by pulling the whole plug out. So you don't have to do this. You're not tuning, and they know what frequencies you're transmitting on, so it's real easy, to pass information. And then spies, of course, modern spies don't use radios. The only time radios is used now today by spies, like the Cuban spies that are here in the United States, is basically the number stations. And as we get down here real quick, I'll talk about how you guys can listen to number stations that transmit every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You just need to know what frequencies they're transmitting on. So this is the radio that's used, like I said, by the French, the British, and the Americans. This station was captured down in South America. This is a German station, and this is a suitcase radio, and this is the actual radio that was in the building. And the Germans were very, very active before and during World War II in South America, with trying to raise all kinds of problems, trying to find out where shipping was going, and just general spying. And so, I mean, they were pretty big radios. I mean, of course, would you really want to cart around a 44-pound radio? And the neat thing about this little information on radios is they would hook these things up to batteries, because the Gestapo in France, what they would do is if you were transmitting and you're using power off the main line, they would shut down sections of town. And when they shut down sections of town, if you're operating, you just lost power and you just went off the air, now they know where to look in what section of town. So to avoid that, they would go ahead and hook a battery to it so you could keep going. Even though now there's radio detection trucks and they're still trying to find you, you can still keep transmitting. And that's how that worked. This is also $7.
What they use for antenna.
Usually clotheslines, just a wire. They'd run a wire out. I'll go through these books sort of quickly. These are World War II related books. This one I think is really, really interesting. Inside Camp X. It is the OSS and British training camp that is in Canada. And it opened up the day after Pearl Harbor. And this thing was so secret that the Canadian people didn't even know about it until 1970, because everybody that lived in this area is out in the farmlands. You were sworn to secrecy, and you didn't talk about what went on there. And it's where they trained agents in communication, sabotage, silent killing, and all the different parachuting, all the different things that you need to do to be a really cool spy. Another interesting thing about spies, or that the general public has about spies, is they don't realize that women are spies. For some reason, if you're a woman, you can't be a spy. And this Sisterhood of Spies is a book about women OSS agents like Julia Childs, who parachuted into France. This is story after story of women during World War II that were spies. And there were thousands of people that were in OSS during World War II. This is an interesting book. It's Agent Zigzag. And what's interesting about this guy is he was a British prisoner. He was a British criminal who was arrested on the island of Jersey. The Germans took over the island of Jersey. He told the Germans that he hated the British. And so they recruited him to be a spy. Well, he was just telling this because he wanted to get out of prison. So they sent him to Germany. They trained him as a spy. They parachuted him back into Britain. As soon as he hit the ground, he went straight to the British intelligence service and told them that he's a spy. And he was working for him. He was a counter spy. But he was probably one of the most successful counter spies because he was feeding the Germans all this fake information. He also supposedly blew up an aircraft factory. What they did was they did all these special effects. They dug holes in the ground to make it look like he blew up this factory. A German aircraft would go over and photograph it and say, "I'll be darned, it's destroyed." And of course it wasn't. And it's kind of interesting a story about this guy. Like I said, he was a British guy that became a German spy. The true story of a Nazi spy in America, Agent 146. This is about a German who came to the United States and was actually not caught. And he eventually he decided that Hitler, I'll get here in a minute, that the Nazis were going to lose the war. So he just transmitted back to Germany once, and then he just gave it up. He met a girl, and you know how that goes. And so his spy career was over. But this book originally came out in 1957. But this is the current edition, I think, which is 2003. There are also in the United States, there were 8 saboteurs who came by submarine. 4 of them were dropped off in Florida, and 4 of them were dropped off in New Jersey. Their job was to destroy magnesium factories, because magnesium is used to help make the skins of airplanes. And of course, these guys were all ex-Americans of German ancestry. The problem was the guy who was leading it was probably the least likely person to be a spy. As soon as all of them got into America, he ran to the FBI and turned himself in. And then the FBI spin the story like that the FBI is very diligent and on top of it, and they caught these spies because the FBI is so cool. The FBI didn't know anything about it at all. This Dash, the guy who turned himself in, was the one that actually told them. And what they ended up doing, if you're a spy during wartime, they kill you. And so 6 of these guys got executed. But this is a very, very interesting story if you're interested in about German spies. But once this failed, Hitler didn't send any more spies to the United States. And as I alluded to earlier, Hitler's Secret War in South America. This is quite an interesting book if you're interested in what German spies were doing in South America. Major network of spies, again, using these clandestine radios to transmit back to Europe. Operative Spies and Saboteurs, the unknown story of men and women of World War II OSS. This again is full of stories of what Americans, men and women, did during World War II to sabotage the German war effort and collect intelligence. I'm sure a lot of you probably have never heard of this group. They're called the Jedburghs, and what they were the forerunner to what would be considered Green Berets today. They were a team of 3. One would be a radio operator, and they would parachute into France, and then they would organize partisans and the French resistance against the Germans. And these guys would get parachuted in just before D-Day, and then organized so that when the word came down, the underground would go out and destroy rail lines, they'd knock down telephone lines, and just cause as much chaos in the back so the Germans couldn't respond as fast. This book, I think, is really fascinating. MacArthur's Undercover War, I mean, it really is interesting. It's about the spies against the Japanese during World War II. This book I just found fascinating because I had no idea how extensive the spy network was in the Pacific and what we actually knew was going on along with. Some of you probably heard of Coast Watchers, the people that volunteered to sit on islands, and they would report anytime they saw Japanese ships go by, they would literally transmit the information back to Australia, and then Australia would get that, and then we'd find out where the Japanese were at. And then the phone would ring.
Incoming call.
Now, for some of you that say, well, you know, reading books is fun, but they're full of words. So this is the kind of the way you can do that without actually having to read a book. National Geographic came out with a thing called Target America. It's a 2-hour special that covers just what we talked about with the Germans that came to the United States to blow up the magnesium factories. This covers that. A lot of you probably never heard of this movie, Carve Her Name with Pride. This is about a British woman whose husband was French, who got killed during World War II, and she volunteered because she could speak French to become part of the OSS. And she actually went to France and spied, but unfortunately she got caught, and then they killed her. But a lot of people that did this, that got caught, the Gestapo would kill you. Well, they torture you and then kill you. This is an interesting movie, and you can watch it next month. I know you're going to watch all these movies next month. It's called Confessions of a Nazi Spy, and came out in 1939. Now, it's really it's a well-made movie from 1939. I know it's in black and white, but it's a true story about a German spy network that they caught in the United States in 1938. Remember, I told you, spies are always here. That's their job, is to spy. This is just a really, really excellent film, and it's on in November. For fun and excitement, as soon as I find it, I will tell you what it is. It is on November 12th at 9:45 a.m. and you'll have to put in a tape or whatever to record that because most of you probably will be working. This is another excellent movie most of you have never heard of, The House on 92nd Street. This is another true story about another German spy group from 1942 that was caught by the FBI. Very, very, very good movie. It's all true to life, and except of course they changed it. And for excitement value, every person that appears in this movie, other than the leading stars, they're all FBI agents. Every one of them. Every person you see in there's an FBI except for the 2 leads. The History Channel has a special called Spies in America, and again, it's about the Germans coming over and trying to destroy our exciting magnesium factories. Some of you have probably seen this movie, The Longest Day with John Wayne. It's about the invasion of Normandy and all that stuff. And the only reason I bring this up is when you watch this movie at 40 minutes and 42 seconds, the British are calling over to France saying, "London calling with messages for our friends. John has a long mustache." And what that was a code to a person that the invasion was on, and their job was to then go out and start destroying stuff or doing whatever their plan was. And if you've seen this movie, the guy puts on his helmet and his wife doesn't know what's going on because he keeps saying John has a long mustache because he'd been waiting the whole war waiting for him to hear that. And then he goes out and I only bring that up because it's one way that messages were passed over the air. This one, a lot of you probably haven't seen. It came out in 1968. It's called Triple Cross. This is based on Agent Zigzag. This is the movie version of the book, so you don't have to read the book. The book is better, but the movie will get you by, but it leaves a lot to be desired in the movie. But it basically shows you how he worked for British intelligence, convinced the Germans that he was, that he hated Britain and he was more than willing to spy against Britain. This is a very interesting film, to me anyway. It's called OSS. It's the only movie they ever made about overseas secret service or strategic services. They made it in 1946. There are real OSS agents in it, and they actually give you a little idea of what went on with OSS, but in 1946 a lot of stuff was still classified, and the general public wasn't to know how things were done. Okay, now we're having fun. I'm trying to move right along here. Okay, codes and secret messages. I'm going to try to give you a crash course on how to do this. Remember now, you're all adults and you didn't hear this from me. Every secret agent, right, you're all secret agents, you need a code book. You've always heard, the code book. Gotta have the code book. Okay, what you want to do is you need to get 2 identical books. Books that wouldn't stand out in your household. Now, in my household, there are 300 different books on UFOs. So if you saw a UFO book in my house, you wouldn't think anything about that. Now, your code book has to have at least 365 pages. All the pages have to have words on it, no pictures and stuff like that. So if I go to page 221, I don't want to see a picture because I can't do a code. And I'll tell you why it's important that all these pages have words on them. So these are code books. You get 2 identical books with at least 365 pages in it, and this is what you're going to use to be able to decode your secret messages, and it's also what you're going to use to send your secret messages. Now what you do is, however you want to do this is up to you. I suggest that you don't write it in the book, but in your mind or on a piece of paper, across the top of the page where it says Mary had a little lamb or whatever's on the top, you want to go A to Z. So A to Z is on the top. Down the side you want to number 1 to 30, 1 to 50. It's up to you guys, whoever you're setting up your code with. So now we've got letters across the top, numbers down the side. So now you've got this thing blocked so you know what it is. So you write out your code, M1, N1, and these are all letters that say something. And when you read all these letters, it says secret message. Now the trick to decoding this message, and the neat thing about this is if somebody finds your message, if they don't have the code book, they can't decipher it. So to them it's, what's this M1, MQ2, what is that? That don't mean nothing to me. Okay, up here I got code key, July 9th, 2008. Now I'm trying to make it easy for you. This is the easiest way to do it. There's 365 days in a year. You can buy calendars that tell you what number the day is. It says this is the 106th day of the year. Okay, this message that you sent me says July 9th. So I go to July 9th, and it tells me to go to page 191, because that's, am I putting you to sleep? No, this is the exciting part. So you go to page, so this tells you to go to page 191. Now you can buy one of these calendars. Now if this was sitting in your house, right, it's on the wall, who's going to think spy anything? That's just a calendar sitting on the wall. But it's your code. You have this and you have this, nobody's going to suspect anything. And when they find your secret message, they can't read it. And like I said, if you want to know about dead drops stuff, I'll touch on that real quickly with dead drops. Okay, so you have your secret message. Take your secret message and roll it up. Now you've got to take it to a dead drop to pass it off. So that if you're working for me and I got to pick up the intelligence and you're hiding it, one thing that I always liked, which I thought was really handy, is you take, again, a nondescript object that people see every day. They know what it is, no big deal. And so you modify it, and then you can stick it somewhere so that it will hide, and I know where it is, and then I can come by and pick it up and walk off with it. Now if there's counter surveillance on you, and they see that you had something in your hand, you always carry one of these. I've carried this for almost 30 years, and I keep my change in it. So if a counterintelligence agent would see that I had something in my hand, he saw what it looked like, I pulled this out of my pocket and say, well, I was just checking my change. I don't know what change I had. And he's done. Because now, you always have to come up with a logical excuse for everything that you do. Same thing on making dead drops. For example, if we were going to do this in Manhattan, I would sit down and get a map of Manhattan. I would mark out 1 through 10 the spots you guys know in Manhattan. And I would say, and I'd send you, you'd have a copy of the map. You need to memorize where these things are. And I say, go to drop 2. And you know where drop 2 is, so you just go. You know where we've already decided we're going to drop the stuff, so you know where to pick it up. And there's many, this is just a simple way of doing cover. There's 100 different ways you can do this. There's these things called spikes. They're really cool. They've got a container in the top and a spike on the end, and you just take them and you push them into the ground. They work really well, and people never see them. So, but anyway.
Could you repeat container as a spike?
Picture this as a container with a spike on it. And you take it and you push it in the ground with your foot, and it goes into the ground.
It goes below the surface.
It goes below the surface. They're really good. It's a, well, it's a spike, basically. But there's 100 different ways you can do it, but simple is always better. You know, when you try to come up with some really complex plan of how you're going to do this stuff, you end up hurting yourself. And always remember counter surveillance. Always remember that somebody's watching you. So you don't walk around saying, I'm Agent 007. And like I said, the biggest thing is, to be a successful spy, people first of all, should not believe that you're a spy. In 100 years, they'd never believe there's no way you're a spy, or that you work for the government and you work, you know. And that's but the people that, well, like I said, the most successful spies you've never heard of. So that's always a good thing. Okay, as far as excitement involved with pirate radio, there was a woman named Sue Carpenter who wrote a book called 40 Watts from Nowhere, A Journey into Pirate Radio. She did low power FM in San Francisco, and she didn't get caught. Well, she did get caught eventually. But she was transmitting her own, she felt that she should be able to put out whatever music she wanted to and have her own opinions. This is a very interesting book if you're interested in learning about eventually doing pirate radio. Not that I said that, but it's a real good book on a starter. I'll give you an idea of what you need to do FM pirate. There are a couple books out on pirate radio stations, and this one came out in 1990, but don't really buy this one. Buy this is 2003. Buy the updated one. It's much better. The frequency range for pirate stations is 6.895 to 6.955. And a lot of this stuff will be an upper sideband, and you might want to start tuning about 6.925. And pirates are just like normal people. The best time to hear them is on weekends or holidays. That's most of the time you're going to find pirates, because they're off from work too. So that's when they're doing their pirating. But they're out there. And then if you can lay your hands on the August edition of Popular Communications, it has a whole article on how to be a pirate and pirate equipment and neat things like that. Of course, I'm sure all of you subscribe to it like I do. So, but anyway, that's a basic primer. And then again, if you're, I'm sorry I can't read, you can watch the Christian Slater movie, Pump Up the Volume, which is really poor on technical detail. Yeah. But this guy runs a pirate radio station in his basement because he doesn't have any friends. Although he has a transmitter on the back of a Jeep, and we all know that what he was doing won't work. But 99% of the people watching this movie are looking at Christian Slater and don't really care that what he's doing technically can't work. Okay, clandestine radio, again, what I said before is no government will admit that they're doing it, even though they are. They will absolutely not admit that they're doing it. So you pay outrageous amounts of money for these really thin books because it's one of those taboo subjects that nobody wants to talk about. They do exist. They are here. These are the only two books I could find on the topic. And then there's this one, the Underground Frequency Guide, which is okay. But I'm going to actually show you a book that's better. But these will give you a background. But you got to remember, when we're talking intelligence services, everything's in the black. None of this stuff exists. Nobody's a spy. Nobody's intelligent. Nobody works for anybody. As far as I know. It's all done by satellites. There is no humans. Now, If you have a copy, this is the 2008 version of Passport to World Band Radio. I'm sure all of you have a copy of that. I know I do. And then if you're really anal retentive like I am, you'll go in there and you'll mark all the clandestine stations in yellow and all the pirate stations in red. And then you'll really get retentive, and then you'll mark the top so you can tell where all the frequencies are. And this will give you literally all the frequencies you need for all the clandestine and pirate radios. Now, this particular page here with all these red, a lot of these are European pirates. The frequencies I gave you for American pirates is where you're going to find most of the American pirates. They're in a very small band. They're in the 6 megahertz band. And the pirates are, these particular European pirates are in a basic band. But I highly recommend if you're interested in clandestine radio traffic or you're interested in pirates to get Passport to America, and it lists all the frequencies in there for you, which is quite handy. This is the only book I could find on spies in America, and probably there's a reason for that. This is the only Cuban spy we've ever busted actually working in the United States government. And she worked in counterintelligence in the United States government, so she couldn't be in a better... It was like Aldrich Ames, the CIA agent, got busted. He worked against counter-Soviet intelligence, and he was giving information to the Soviets. And there was also 2 FBI agents, Hansen and another guy, I can't think of his name. Those are the only 2 FBI agents that ever were caught. Again, they were counter-Soviet, and they turned and was giving information to the Soviets. And this book is kind of interesting. It pretty much went under the radar. A lot of people didn't talk about it because it happened right around 9/11. And apparently 9/11 was the only thing that happened that year. And so catching a Cuban spy in the United States didn't take high priority. But what's interesting here on this one page, it says, page 134, the Cubans would broadcast coded messages to Anna several times a week. After receiving the message on her shortwave radio, she decrypted them using a system provided to her by the Cuban intelligence service. And that's just what I was telling you, that the Cubans do transmit. And let me give you a couple exciting frequencies. Okay. These are 2 active frequencies that are active every day at 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At 7.887 at 3 o'clock and 6.885 at 4 o'clock. Now again, I tell you, they transmit 24 hours a day. What you can do is you can take the active frequencies and make a block diagram like I did, and then if you have plenty of free time on your hand, which most people don't, you could actually find every frequency. But what you'll hear is attention, attention in Spanish, and then she'll say ucho, whatever, taco, whatever, and then I don't speak Spanish, but I know she's given numbers in Spanish, and so whoever ucho taco is, in Kansas somewhere, is and the neat reason why they do numbering stations is you can be a spy in your house and you can receive information from your intelligence agency and they can't find you because it's a one-way transmission and it goes all over the United States. So John is sitting in Junction City and I'm tuning in and listening to what the spies are sending, although I don't have a one-time pad. And let me see if I have a picture here of a one-time pad to give you guys an idea of what they look like. One-time pads are kind of cool. They've changed them over the years. They've changed them now to where they dissolve in water so you can stick them in your mouth if you're ever compromised. They didn't used to work that way. Here you go. This is what a one-time pad looks like. They're tiny, but it gives you, this is how you transcribe your message. That was your ucho, taco, whatever. This is what you use. And we just did that. I just gave you a version of how to do it in your house by using your code books. It's the same exact principle. And again, every day you change your code because every day you're using a different date of the calendar. So you're using a different page in your code book. So somebody that thinks that they know that you use page 191 or whatever, and then you're going to, you're using another page, and you don't have to use the same date. You can just put whatever date you want on there, as long as the other person knows what page they're supposed to go to. So that's always a lot of fun. And this book is quite interesting. This is a true story of a Canadian who became an Israeli spy because he fell in love with Israel. And again, if I can go to one page on here, and a lot of these books are really good because they're written by real agents, and they actually give you real information, although they're not supposed to, they do. But again, here it says on page 94, after the meeting, Charles and I retired to our hotel where we were scheduled to receive a shortwave radio message from headquarters authorizing the next phase of our mission. Like all such public broadcast transmissions received from Mossad, this requires the use of a one-time pad to decode, and I just showed you what a one-time pad was. Armed with our pads, all we had to do was tune into a specific shortwave radio frequency at an appointed time, wait for the appropriate call sign. Mine was Victor Lima Bravo, so he would listen for Victor Lima Bravo. That told him the next thing comes in is his message, and then they would decipher using the pad. So it's really simple how that works. And then I guess I wanted to stop with a little more information now. You guys are just all excited about learning about being a spy or maybe knowing somebody who's a spy and all kinds of cool stuff. So I picked up some books that have to do with spies and espionage. This is The Idiot's Guide to Spies and Espionage. Actually, it's not a bad book. I know when you see Idiot's Guide, it's like, you got to be like an idiot to read it. But what it does is it gives a lot of good basic information. When I told you about dead drops, it's got things in here about dead drops and how to do brush passes and all these other cool things for passing information. If you want to know about the history of espionage, I highly recommend the Encyclopedia of Espionage. This thing covers tons, and what's really cool about this book, if you read it, you'll get upset because you'll discover how many people in the armed forces are traitors, that they give their spies. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of people that get arrested. Officers, enlisted people that are giving information to the enemy. Now, personally, my belief is that if you do that in the military, you should be shot. But unfortunately, they only shoot you if it's a wartime, and then sometimes they don't even do it then. So I get disturbed. But I think if you want to stop spying in the military, just shoot people. Say, okay, we catch you, we shoot you in the head. That's what you do in Russia. If you're caught as a spy in Russia, they shoot you in the head. I mean, when they find out you're giving information to America, they call you back saying, we want to give you that raise or that vacation, and they shoot you in the head. And it kind of slows people down. This is probably a really good book on spycraft. It's written by a former SAS officer. The SAS is like the Green Beret over here. It's the British version of the Green Beret. And the information he gives you in here is absolutely correct. But again, you'd have to know that, I guess, to know that what he's giving you is actually real stuff. If you say to yourself, this is so much fun, I want to run my own spy ring, I recommend this book, How to Run a Spy Ring. This is written by an intelligence officer. He talks about when he was an intelligence officer in the military, and he ran, the North Vietnamese had a bar that they used to have these very attractive women in, and GIs would come in there and they would be able to get information on what unit they were at, movement of supplies, blah, blah, blah. You know how that works. You know how GIs, well, you don't. GIs are good about, trying to talk big around women, not realizing they're in the middle of a spy collection thing. But this book I highly recommend if you want to learn more about spies and how to run a spy network. Now I said earlier that there's two kinds of spies: diplomats that have diplomatic cover and illegals. This is a true story about an illegal. Now you may not believe it, but it's true. This guy worked for the CIA and he killed people. He killed 18 people, but he got paid by the CIA, but he was not a CIA employee, because we don't kill people, because as far as I know, we're not allowed to kill people. This guy accidentally killed 18 people. And it's really a funny book. Well, it's a funny book from this point of view. If you read it, it's a travel log of where he travels around the world to all these cool places. He tells you all about these cool places, and then he accidentally kills somebody because they need to be dead. And so it's really interesting. It also shows how the CIA transfers money to these people. And of course, the CIA denies that this is a real book. But this guy said that he decided he wanted to write it because it is true. But he said, whether people believe it or not, he thought the history should be there. But this is true. This is an illegal, and we do kill people. Sometimes unsuccessfully, but we try. But the people that we do kill that you don't know about, that's always a good thing. It looks like it was a road accident or something like that. Like I said, it's an excellent book. He killed he killed 3 female German agents in East Berlin. Well, it's pretty classic how he killed them. I thought it was kind of neat anyway. He set up 2 reflectors. He took some reflector tape, and he put some reflector tape on the bottom below where the driver's is, and he put a piece of reflector tape on the top. Then he knew the route that they were coming at night back from. He set up with a rifle, and when they came around the turn, he took the 2 pieces of reflector tape and then shot the woman in the head that was driving the car. Then he went in and then he manually killed the 2 other women in there, and then he set fire to the car, because you want to make sure that people don't know that you actually shot somebody. So anyway, he burned it up. Again, the intelligence services knows this stuff all goes on. They know these women didn't have a wreck, that they were killed, but that's that's how the game is played. There's a couple, again, for people, I'm not going to read that, so I highly recommend this movie if you really want to know about real spies. It's called A Family of Spies. It's about an American that was in the Navy. He was a communications specialist, and he spied for the Russians for over 20 years. He gave them all the communication secrets of the United States Navy. If we had went to war during the time he was in, we would have lost, because the Russians were reading all the Navy traffic. Of course, he's in jail now. But this is a really good movie if you want to see how dead drops work, how espionage works, and things like that. It's a really, really good book, or good movie. Another good movie I really liked, some of you may have already seen, is The Falcon and the Snowman. This is about 2 guys, one guy that worked for a TRW, which is a communications place that works with satellites. And this guy was giving information to Sean Penn, who was basically a small-time criminal. He went to Mexico City to the Soviet embassy and was trying to sell this information to the Soviets. And of course, they didn't care about Sean Penn, because they wanted this guy. They wanted Timothy, whatever his name is, Timothy Hutton, because he was the guy who had the information. And he got caught, and he went to prison, and he was in prison for 4 years, and he escaped. But they caught him again, so he's back in prison again. And so this is a really, really good book, or a good movie on spies. But if you want training, if you guys don't have any training as spies, there are 2 good series you can watch for training to become a spy. I recommend Get Smart. It's a comedy, but actually some of the stuff they do, it's doofus, comedy stuff. Obviously they're not real spies. But some of the stuff that they do is actually spy-oriented, like what real spies actually do. But this is, like I said, all in a comedy-type version. And if you watch Hogan's Heroes, these guys are actual spies. Hogan's Heroes are actually spies inside in a prisoner of war camp. And they do espionage, they do sabotage, they do all the things that OSS did during World War II. Again, this is a comedy, but it's all based on real stuff. And I'm more than happy to take any questions about spies and espionage and all that kind of cool stuff.
John, on your pirate stations, now, how do you identify them as a pirate station? I assume they don't have call signs, or do they? No,
what will happen is you'll be tuning through the dial, and you'll just come across a station that has crazy music, and they have all fake ads. They'll have crazy ads that make absolutely no sense. Well, they're just, some of them are kind of off color, but anyway, you'll know right away this is not a normal station that's transmitting. And the neat thing is you only have to go in that small band spread, upper sideband, lower sideband, just scan through, and on Friday night, Saturday night, or holidays, Christmas, whatever major holiday, that's when these pirates are out there doing it, because they're just normal people like us, I guess. Any other questions about spies, espionage?
Any other frequencies for your number stations? I've actually heard some of them before.
Well, I tell you, it's the 2 frequencies I gave you are active, but I'll tell you what you can do. There is a place you can go on the internet. You can go to, well, one, you can go to Pirate Radio Central, which has all pirate radio stations and stuff that they got currently. And then go to spynumbers.com, and they list all the people that sit around all day and listen to spy stuff. And this has current stuff. Oh, and something I just want to touch on real quick. Something else you guys may already know. Every time you watch a spy movie, you always see them, they use a camera like this. It's a Minox camera. It's a real spy camera, and you can buy them. They sell it right now for about $1,000. And the early versions of these cameras are kind of neat because people, you know, when you photograph, I don't know if any of you ever tried to photograph documents, but you've got to get the focal length right, otherwise the thing's out of focus. So what they used to do, some of the earlier cameras actually had a little metal string thing you could pull out, so you could actually pull it out and go like this until you learned where the focal length was to photograph the pictures. And you want to give that to any of your new agents or people that are working for you that aren't familiar with operating a camera. But today, with technology as it is, this is the latest thing that's taken the place of the Minox camera. You can own one of these for $236 from Brando. You can get them on the internet. This is actually cool. This is the way to go. I mean, if you're going to do espionage, it's downloadable to your computer. It's digital, has a lens here at 2 o'clock, and you can go into, you know, wherever you're going in to collect intelligence and photograph all day long, and because it's digital, you can probably get 200 or 300 pictures in there, and laugh, run home, plug it in, and download everything to your computer, and then encode it and either send it off, you know, through email, I guess, to whoever you send it to. But this would be excellent. This would be a big boom as opposed to doing this. Because of this, you got to take all your film. Then you don't want to get caught with your film. I don't know if I should tell you it's not, but I think it will because we're all friends and you all want to be spies. Whenever you go somewhere on an assignment, a lot of times what would happen is you would go to a hollow door. You'd take off a piece of the top of the door and get a piece of string and tie the exposed film to it and drop it down inside the door. So that way, if another counter-espionage organization, the country that you're in, were to sweep in and do your hotel room or wherever you're at, a lot of times they don't look indoors. So, and I tell you that, one, I guess, because I don't really think that technique's probably used much anymore. Well, obviously not. But anyway, it was a technique that was quite popular about 20 years ago to hide film.
What dimensions on that thing?
On this, oh, it's not very big. Probably 4 by 2 by probably 6. It's really small. It's tiny. You can just put it right in your pocket. Like I said, you can buy them on the internet. I don't know if they get film for them though, because you know they have little film canisters that you put in them. I'd recommend doing this if you're going to start spying. It's cheaper and you can download it to your computer. And then, like I said, now you know how to do dead drops. You know how to use a code book, make your own messages up, and just have fun. And then next thing you know, the FBI finds out about you, and then they start watching your house and listening to your phone calls.
Talking about pirates, somebody went to K-State, a friend of mine, was an FCC engineer, and he's now engineer in charge for Chicago, but I got to ride around with him in one of their cars once, and what they would have him do when he was new with them, fresh out of K-State, was they'd send him off to a town where there was a pirate station or something, because they had triangulated and they figured out what town it was in. And then the FCC would call him. He'd go and sit in the hotel room, just chill. And then he'd get a call and say they're on. And then he'd take this cart, and it was just a modified Ford sedan, and it had
A false roof in the top.
yeah,
that had
a
the
false
coil.
roof.
Yeah.
The back was full of radio equipment.
And then he'd just drive
there
around
was
with
this
the
compass thing on the front, and he had it in Manhattan once, and we went driving around and trying. We found, we just dialed up KMKF, and it just
Took you right to the
place you
transmitter.
go. It tells you turn right here because you could see the compass thing swing. We drove right to their yard.
Yeah, a lot of people think, again, most civilians think that they think of transmitter trucks, think there's going to be a truck with this great big fly strap sort of
Yeah.
antenna on the top going around like this when it's not. They use regular cars with false tops on them that have these induction cable or coils in them that they use for running you down. They're pretty sneaky. And like I said, the nearest station to us is Omaha, Nebraska. Or is it Lincoln? No, I think it's Omaha. They've got a
Grand
listening.
Island.
Yeah, they've got a listening station up there in Nebraska. So they need that one and then 2 more somewhere else to triangulate where you're at, and then you're
It's
done.
not like that Pump Up the Volume movie where they
No,
have
it's
yellow vans with FCC
See,
and
yeah,
2 foot high.
Exactly, and they're going around, trying to find you, but that's all World War II stuff. But anyway, I hope you found it interesting. I'm a big fan, like I said, of spies and espionage and things like that. Not that I have any personal knowledge of being a spy or know anything really about espionage at all. This is just stuff that I picked up on the internet. So,
I had a question. Now you mentioned most modern spies don't use radios.
no.
So which form of communications do they?
Most, if you're an intelligence agent and you're collecting from your people, you normally do it through dead drops. And in an emergency situation, sometimes we teach people, people have learned to use telephones, and then we use these pagers. And the pagers have a numeric code on them that send over the telephone, and it goes to an embassy, and the embassy takes it and then transmits the information right there. It can be done very quickly, and of course, again, I can tell you that because they don't use telephone booths anymore. So, but that's one way the information would be passed. But a lot of times but like I said, it's so cool to be a spy today because you have the internet. So, for example, if they told you, I want you to go to this place in California, and I want you to check out this wharf and all stuff. You can get on the, what's that called? They have everything photographed in the world. I mean,
Google Earth.
and you go right to the site, and you can do your spying on the internet. You can actually look at everything without actually being there. I mean, that's just outstanding, as opposed to physically having to go there and look around and not get caught doing anything. Theoretically, anyway. But anyway.
Well, you comment there on in World War II in the tank battalion, tank division, we had code, and we changed it every day, every day, on transmission of any message.
That's one way to stay ahead of them. Yeah, because if you get lazy operators, and this was more common during World War I, is that they would use the same basic code back and forth. Well, once you broke the code, which is what we did, we had a thing called the Black Chamber, which was engineers here in the United States during World War I, and they actually were breaking codes. And of course, you don't want the enemy to know you're breaking codes. We did the same thing during World War II. In a place called Bletchley Park, which is in Britain, they had broke the German Enigma code. And I didn't bring a picture of an Enigma machine, but picture like a giant typewriter, and it has these wheels in it. And each one of these wheels have all these different settings for A to Z. But the more wheels you put in there, the more complicated the code is. And if I push A on here and the wheels move, A might come out as Z. And you have to know what the code settings are to be able to decipher the message. Well, sometimes the Germans would get lazy and they would send the initial code to the other operator to say, okay, this is my setting X, 4, 3, whatever. But we had to use very primitive computers and a lot of writing down in figures to actually break the code. But we actually broke the Enigma code. So we were able to read almost all German traffic. And that's why the German submarines during World War II, all these Wolfpacks started getting destroyed. But we had to keep it secret that we knew where they were, but we had to make it look like an accident. Like we just happened to have a ship there, or a plane just happened to be there. So the Germans could say, well, that's how they discovered us. Because we didn't want them to know we were reading their traffic. We also, during World War II, the Americans broke the Japanese purple code. And we were reading Japanese traffic. We read about 90% of the Japanese traffic. The Japanese didn't know that. So it was probably the most guarded, one of the most guarded secrets during World War II was the fact that we broke the Germans and the Japanese codes. The most secret thing was the atomic bomb. And the Germans were working on the atomic bomb, but they weren't very far. And then the Japanese thought about it as an afterthought. They actually went to microwave weapons. That was what they were working on.
We captured a bunch of those scientists in southern Germany. I'm reading the book. Now it can be told, and they got these names in there, and it's right where we were. And we did capture some of them and got them out of there and shipped them out. And we captured a jet plane, the 262 jet.
Oh yeah, the first jet
We
jet
captured
fighter.
one of those at Munich there, and we boxcarred that thing and sent it to Dayton, Ohio. That was before the war was over and everything.
Anything else?
Yeah. John, we're all kind of suffering the results of a famous spy case that seemed to go astray. And I'm talking about the start of the present Iraqi war. And before it started, Bush came out, Bush administration, and said Saddam Hussein and his regime has these weapons of mass destruction. Now, it turned out he didn't have. Where did the spying go wrong, John? Do you know?
Yeah, well, that really goes back to politics. Number one, the first thing that goes in any war is truth. That goes out the window. And the American public was inundated with propaganda, which you have to get the American people behind a war, otherwise nobody's interested in being involved in it. Yeah, there was tons of lies about what was being said and what was found. The thing about the germ factory things on wheels, that was not true. During the first Gulf War, if you remember, there was a girl that testified in Congress and said that when she was in Kuwait, the Iraqis were stabbing babies on bayonets. They were taking babies out of incubators and throwing them on the floor, and to enrage the American public, which worked really well. But none of this stuff was true. It was a complete lie. The girl that was telling you the story, they acted like she was a peasant or just somebody. Her father was a high-ranking official in the Kuwaiti government. But but yeah, there's so much subterfuge and propaganda and stuff that goes on that you just. And when they say, well, the weapons of mass destruction, there isn't any. And everybody just kind of goes, okay.
Well, couldn't some of that stuff been taken over to Syria?
Could have been.
When people got close to it?
Yeah, that was one of the stories. But again, we photograph the entire Earth every second, everywhere, everything. I mean, we photograph everything all the time. They have constant intelligence running. There'd be no way that we would miss, even if we didn't actually see it. It'd be recorded on some satellite, and we'd be able to see the trucks and all the stuff going, into Syria. So I am convinced that it didn't exist. And it's just like if you remember back early, they wanted to connect Saddam Hussein to 9/11, and he had nothing to do with 9/11, but they wanted to connect the two so that people would kind of. I was lost on that one. I don't know how they tried to connect that up. It didn't make any sense to me at all. And again, the people that actually crashed into 9/11 or flying the planes, they were Saudi Arabians, and Saudi Arabia is supposed to be our ally. So
Yeah.
how does that work?
Do you believe? Do you have an opinion on, for example, does intelligence mislead the president, or the military sometimes mislead the president, so he'll serve for him, or does the president mislead us?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, see, John, on that same incident,
Mhm.
as I remember afterwards, the president blamed the intelligence
Mhm.
community, and the community intelligence said, no, he misinterpreted. So who did lie to us? We don't know.
Well, this is the way it works. And when you're talking intelligence and you're talking politics, intelligence officers gather intelligence that they're told to gather. They make reports, and then they pass the information on to headquarters. Headquarters, what they do with it is look at it and say whatever. But what I think happens is once it goes from the intelligence agency to the president, there are people in the background that say, well, let's change this sentence to say probably or maybe has, and they change the actual meaning. The classic example of what's made public is when the former CIA agent Flame, what was her first name? Valerie Plame. Her husband was a diplomat, an ambassador. He was sent on a secret mission to Africa to find out if Hussein was actually getting uranium to make a bomb. He went, he searched, he looked, found nothing. Says absolutely they're not doing it. But in the State of the Union address that Bush gave, he said on reliable sources, and he quoted the British Secret Service. and the British Secret Service didn't have anything to do with it at all. And then when the news media stepped on it and said, wait a minute, the British Secret Service never said this, then we played this game of who said what and where did this all come out. And then that's why Valerie Plame got her ID, her identity exposed, so she could no longer be a CIA agent. Because like I said, once they know you're a CIA agent, you're useless. And you can't do any work. But I think that's politics. Politics more than intelligence. I think intelligence knows what's going on because like I said, as I just told you before, if you're not aware of it, the United States spies on everybody and everybody spies on the United States. Everybody. It's a constant game all the time.
The thing that struck me is early on in your talk, you talked about spying on New Zealand, and I can imagine for the life of me why we would need to do that. But.
Well, like I said, there's been, I didn't bring them in here, but there's been loads of cases where there's Mossad, which they're very good at what they do. They're very good at what they do, but they do get caught sometimes. And sometimes they kill the wrong person. I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but back in 1972, there was a massacre at the Olympics in Germany. And there was Israeli athletes that were killed. Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel, said, I want all of the terrorists that killed the Israeli athletes to be accidentally terminated. And so they actually had a project going forward where they literally searched the earth or searched the whole world finding these guys, and when they found them, they killed them. And they killed all of them. They got all of them. They either blew them up, shot them. One really cool way they killed this one guy, well, I just it's kind of cool, is they snuck into his apartment and they loaded up his phone full of explosives. And then they called him up and they asked, is this so-and-so? And he said, yeah. And when he said, yeah, they pushed a button, they blew his head off. Very effective for slowing people down. But they made one mistake. They ID'd what they thought was one of the terrorists in Switzerland. And it turned out this guy was just a waiter. I mean, he looked like the guy, and he was of Palestinian origins, and so they killed him because they thought for sure, yeah, this is the guy, and then it turned out it wasn't the guy. And then that got to be kind of a mess. But what they normally do is, like I said, a lot of people get killed accidentally a lot of times, and you just don't know about it because you just think it's an accident, that they accidentally died. But that's why I think spies are cool. And I think the whole world of espionage and intelligence is really neat. And there's so many stories. You could write a whole history book on history that we don't know, that will probably never be released to the American public, of things that we really do and what we're up to. Well, here's another classic example. This dead guy, or he might be asleep, he was a German who parachuted into Britain during World War II, and he got so depressed because he spent the money they gave him, and he didn't know what to do. He couldn't make contact with another German agent, so he went down to a subway and shot himself. And what's really funny is when British intelligence found this guy, they didn't know he was in the country, because 99% of the agents that parachuted into Britain during World War II were picked up, because we had been able to get into the German network, so we knew when they were training a German agent and when they were coming in. And then plus the agent Zigzag, who was actually a British guy who said he was working for the Germans, he gave the British intelligence all the information on codes and times and frequencies and all that kind of stuff. So, it was really neat. At least I thought so anyway. Well, if no other questions, I'll just put my stuff away and pretend like I'm a spy.
Oh, what about spies in Manhattan? What are they looking for? Are they?
Well, this is between us because we're all spies.
Sign in, Fred.
My guess is that there are intelligence agents here in Manhattan that are posing as college students from foreign countries. There is an FBI office here in town. It's very small and it's kept quiet, and they are doing surveillance on K-State. But you didn't hear that from me. But yeah, there are spies here, and they're actually here in Manhattan. But there's spies everywhere. But like I said, you wouldn't know a spy if you met one, if they're good, because they don't. In your mind, you have an idea what a spy looks like, right? I mean, you have an idea. Like when you think of spies, you say, well, I don't know. Some people
Kind
think
of like Pierce Brosnan.
Well, yeah, they think James Bond. They said, well, this is a spy. So when you look, you say, well, there's no way this guy could be a spy, because he doesn't look like James Bond, so he can't be a spy. And that's how, those are the best spies. The best spies are people that do an entire career as a spy, and you never know it.
We're gonna have to burn that film.
But like I said, these books I think are really fascinating if you want to get into the world of spies and espionage, and you'll find out all the kind of cool things that are going on that you may not be aware of. And I showed you a little, like, what's called tradecraft is what they call that, on how to be a spy.
What's the movie about with,
on the table.
with Michael Douglas and that blonde lady and she was a secretary that could speak German, and she went over to Germany to spy on some.
You don't know the name of the film?
No, I fucking knew mine.
You got me on that one. Oh, by the way, if anybody's interested in anything we're throwing down about, we've got things up here. The films, the books, and the exciting Turner Classic Movie listing of all the exciting spy movies. So you can put on your dark glasses and your trench coat and sit down on the TV set and watch spy movies.